Testing, so you can hear me there? Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to be here, and you can tell it's springtime because I'm wearing my red shoes. That's how I celebrate my spring. So off with the boots, on with the red shoes. So thanks for showing up. For those of you that do not know me, my name is Dan Clark. I am the director of the Local Government Center at Montana State University. The packets that you folks that are in the room that you received on the back of our folder is our contact information. If you want to get a hold of us or have any questions, you can call or email us and we can respond to questions that might come up after the training, or you're thinking about something or something comes up at a future board meeting. You can always reach out and we'll see if we can't help you. For those of you that are joining us online, I believe the handouts have been made available to you from a website or emailed or through email. Yeah, yeah, so there's ways in which you can access those handouts. So I'll give you a little bit of a rundown about our center. The center is, it's called the Local Government Center. It's based out of MSU Bozeman. We're underneath the umbrella of Extension. So within the umbrella of MSU Extension. We've been around for over 30 years now. We formed as a result of the voter review process, which is part of our Constitution. Every 10 years, the voters in a city or county can vote on whether they want to study their existing form of government and propose any changes. And so that's been happening every 10 years. And so after the first round that we did in the 70s and the 80s was a big mess because nobody knew what was going on. And so the center was created to help local governments go through that process. And as a result, we've evolved. There you go. And we are now recognized in the Montana Code Annotated. We have our mission is in the MCA. Our mission is threefold. To build the capacity of local governments in the state of Montana through technical assistance, research, and training. So we spend a lot of our time running around the state providing training. So I'm here today. I'll be in the office tomorrow. I'm in Helena, Wednesday, Miles City, and Broadus on Thursday and Friday. So if those places are not at all familiar to you, that would not surprise me. So Miles City, maybe Broadus is a fun little town southeast of Montana. So anyway, that's what we do. Do a lot of traveling, a lot of training, answering lots of emails and phone calls, trying to help local governments figure out how to best serve the people in their local jurisdiction. For those of you that there's water and snacks in the back. For those at home, I guess whatever's in your kitchen, you're welcome to have snacks while we go through the training. As you'll notice, I have handouts. The handouts in the packets, we'll use those handouts. We will not cover everything that's in the handout, but there are a lot of things. So here's the deal. I do not come with a PowerPoint presentation because I want you folks to guide the discussion. I have created a bunch of handouts, so pretty much anywhere you want to go, we'll likely either have a handout or I can just speak to that. But here in a minute, I want you to be thinking about, and I'll ask you in a moment, but I want you to be thinking about what it is that you want to make sure we cover today in this presentation. Is there particular issues or questions you have about your service on your board that we can talk about here? And that's what's going to guide this, our agenda today. And likewise, those folks that are joining us out on the Zoomtopia, if you want to type it in the chat and Kayla will tell us if there's anything we need to add to the list. So while you're thinking about what it is we want to talk about, I want to go through the room just really quickly and ascertain what boards are represented in the room. So it gives me a sense of who I'm talking to and I can tailor the presentation to your particular area of service. So we could probably just do introductions. We're not a very big group, so might make Missoula and Missoula County feel a little bit smaller when we can all get to hear each other's names. So if you can just introduce us your name and what board you're serving on, or for some of you that are high achievers, what boards, which may be multiple boards you're serving on, that we can help you with. So let's start with you.
My name is Greg Tigan on Frenchtown Fire Board.
Okay, Fire Board.
Horn, City of Missoula Parks and Recreation.
Oh, okay. So you're with the city and help with the board?
Oversee the board.
Oversee the board? Good. Okay. Food policy, great. How about you? Same. There we go. There we go. Here we go. Your fire board. Okay, I'm with you. All right. How about you? Community council. Sewer board. All right, good.
My name is Dory Galels, and I'm on the Missoula.
Great. Okay.
I'm Larry Nagy. I'm with the Parker Communications.
Sewer water district. Campbell?
Campbell Barrett, County Fair.
Fair event committee. Get you a handout. Anyone else that snuck in that needs it? There you are. Did I not give you? Just walk right past you. All right. All right. And then board and name. Okay, great. Welcome, Beverly. Oh, I missed you. Sorry. Okay, good. All right, this side. Let's start with you. Oh, you went already? Oh, there we go. Okay. Jeez.
My name's Randy Tangle, and I'm with the library board.
Library board. Okay.
I'm Adrian Beck, work for the Missoula Office of Emergency Management, oversee the local planning committee, and then also serve on the Missoula.
Oh, okay. Good.
I'm Amber Schaefer, and I serve on the advisory committee as their Native American representative.
Great. Did we get everybody? All right.
Dan, do you want me to read the folks online?
Yeah, if you could, please.
So we have Joanne with the Lolo Mosquito Board. We have Forrest with the Library Board. We have Karen with the Weed Board. We have Hannah with the Conservation Land Advisory Committee. We have Michael with the AIS Board, which is the Aquatic Invasive Species Board. We have Roslyn with the Jedi Advisory Board, who is helping to create that. We have Jody, who is the member of the Clerk Pork Market Board, is Jessica, Missoula County Parks and Trails, Justin, Planning and Zoning Commission, Kalina, staff for the Neighborhood Council's Leadership Team and Community Forum, Kathy Coors, Condon Swan Valley Community Council, Chad Bauer, Energy and Climate, Lisa Smith, Animal Control, Erica Berglund, Missoula Food Policy Advisory Board, Judy with the LEPC, and that's it.
Wow. Okay. Quite a diverse group of boards as well. So welcome everyone online and those of you that are here. Thanks for being here. Hopefully you can find something from today's presentation that'll be helpful to you. So you've had a few minutes now to ponder and ruminate over the question, what is it you want to make sure we cover by the end of this session today? So is there anyone that would like to start out by saying, yeah, can we make sure we cover XYZ? We could. We've got a handout on it, and so we could probably cover some basic structure and process for Robert's rules to help you just navigate, particularly if you're like a new board chair. It's like, ooh, how do I make sure I'm in my lane? But
the more important follow-up question, I guess, is there any other format that's better than that? That, like something, you know, new and different?
No, there's basically three different forms that you can use. One's Mason's, Robert's rules, and then there's a third one that just escapes me right now. But we can talk about Robert's rules in a way that's helpful for small boards. This is going to be the problem without a PowerPoint, because then I get rabbit trailed. But the idea with Robert's rules is it's designed around a large association. So if you have 100 members, how do we manage a meeting with 100 people to where we can get an equitable, fair process that people can participate, have their voice heard, and be able to vote and have a majority rule, but also protect the rights of minorities. So those are the basic principles of Robert's rules. They have since, in the last 15 or so years, maybe longer, but they've created a little compendium. Compendium. That is the folks that oversee Robert's rules, the grand poobahs of meeting managers. But they've made a system that's designed for small boards. So it was never intended to be for a small legislative body, but for a large association. So how do we convert that large, somewhat awkward process to make it functional for a smaller legislative body of maybe 5 members? And so we can talk a little bit about some of those strategies that can help you basically facilitate a meeting that's effective, that allows people to participate in a fair and equitable process, and that the rights of the minority are protected and the majority rules.
And does the city/county have an overall agreement every Robert rules?
I'm going to look to those that either work for the city or the county. I'm not certain if there is a policy that has any of those requirements. So it's going to be in your individual bylaws unless there's a city or county policy that says otherwise. So we'll operate on the assumption that it's up to your local board. And we'll talk about some of those, the local policies that you can create in that structure. Yeah. Yes.
I have some familiarity. But what's the difference, I guess,
Yeah. Ooh, say that last bit again.
The role in terms of this division of like the board members and there's like
Yeah, I mean, a city county or county library or city county or city county library? Okay.
Dan,
Yeah.
could you repeat the questions as you give the answers to, please, for the online folks?
Yeah, so the question is the nonprofit versus public boards. What are the differences there? And then what's governance and expectations there? And then there's this idea of
relationship between board.
the staff. Yeah, so with the role of the board and the staff. So it's going to be unique for each one. So library is going to be a little bit unique. Fire board is going to be a little bit unique. Advisory boards, your food policy is going to be. Yeah, so we'll have to we'll try to cover some of that and that how to structure that. Yeah, so I don't want to lose that. That would be we'll call it roles and responsibilities. Yeah. That just says relationship, all jammed up in one. Yeah. Subcommittees, open meetings, great. Yeah.
When and the appropriate use of consent agenda.
Okay, consent agenda.
Question on the consent agenda. My question would be, I would call executive session. Is that the same thing?
No, but we'll put up executive session or closed meetings. So consent agenda, executive session, those are the open meetings, subcommittees, open meetings. I didn't mention those earlier when they're asking them, but yeah. Other topics or areas that you want to make sure we touch on. Or some of you are like, I don't know what I don't know, so just start talking and it'll be something new for me to learn. Anything coming from our friends online?
Conflicts of interest.
Ooh. Okay, conflict of interest. Anything else? Adrian?
I don't know how to frame the question, but around if you were going to set ground rules for public comment, at which point does that need to be done?
Oh, I see. Yep. Okay.
If you want to put a time limit on public comment, only allow non-repetitive comments, you can do that kind of midstream, or if you have to set that.
Yeah. Yeah. Good one to bring up.
We have a question online from Rick.
Hi, I'm on an advisory board and it's pretty casual, but it's a county board. We don't seem to keep or post minutes or a record of the hearing, is it? What's the legal requirements for record keeping?
Yeah. Okay, so minutes and records, great. We'll add that to the list. Oh, this is all some good stuff. Now I'm struggling to think about time. I'll have to be very focused. Who all has already participated in one of these presentations I've done in the past? Just, oh my goodness. Oh, folks, buckle up. This is going to be a ride for you. All right. Anything else, Kayla, online?
Nothing
All right.
right now.
Well, as you can see, this is pretty informal. So as things come up, or if you want to add, we can certainly add that, add things as we go along. So I think the commitment's to get out of here by 5. Okay. So let's do this.
And I do have one quick one.
Oh yeah.
External communications beyond public notice of meetings.
External communications.
Beyond public notice of meetings. So other outreach, it sounds like,
Okay.
is how I'm reading that.
And let us know if that's not how we should be reading it. Yeah. Excellent. I love that. Yeah, so that was what I was trying to figure out. So let's get, yeah. Ex parte. So ex parte communications. So for some of you that are on land use boards, we could maybe touch on that. We'll see what kind of time we've got, but these are all fairly complicated, 15, 20-minute conversations to really understand some of these things to a level that you can say, okay, I feel confident moving out of this room. If I can remember what the crazy guy said, I think I'll be okay. So let's start out with so let me paint this picture to help you have a little bit of context for where we're operating from. And then from there, that provides you a framework to think about your role as a public servant. All of you are serving in a public capacity on a board of some sort. So let me ask the question, why do we create government? What's the point of having government? And it's just not to annoy us. Just this is a good friendly crowd, right? Because all of you are in government, whether you like it or not. You are part of the machine. But why government? Okay. Yeah. So couple. Yeah. Yeah. So how? Yeah. It's free for all, right? So we want structure. We want some structure. We want some boundaries, right? When we come and live in close proximity, there can be a lot of conflict that comes out of that. So we want somebody there to help create order, some structure for us, to be a place for us to mediate our differences, right? So think about the mediating our differences idea. Government often operates like a fulcrum as we're trying to balance individuals and communities' interests, right? So you think about that. So you're often mediating some of those differences. So if you think of a city council or a county commission, so city council, for example, you've got a barking animal, barking dog out there, or chickens. If we want to have chickens, some people really want chickens, some people absolutely do not want chickens. And so how do we balance that and create a chicken ordinance that's going to meet the best for the most, right? And so that's one of the roles of government, to mediate those differences. It's also there to provide services, right? Things that it makes more sense for us to do collectively rather than individually, like water and sewer and fire protection, police protection, Fairs, county fairs is another one. It's an opportunity for us to come together as community. Why on earth, if you think about the amount of resources that are captured, public resources on fairgrounds around the state. We have 56 fairgrounds, large swaths of land with infrastructure and buildings that are seen there that most of the time, unlike here, I'm sure you got them occupied every day. Things are happening down at the fairgrounds in Missoula County, but they just kind of sit there until used a couple of weeks a year. But why do we make that public investment? This is an opportunity for us to come together as community, to break bread together, to share with experiences with the others. It builds community. And so that's why we make that investment. We're not sure, we don't always articulate it well, but we would know it if we tried to get rid of it. We'd say, oh no, we want that. There's a value that we have placed as a society on having that type of opportunity. And so we've come together as a community and said, we're going to elect people to represent our interests, to mediate our differences, to create order for our communities. And in that process, those folks will also appoint people to help with that process. If you think about the role of a county, they're doing everything from roads and bridge maintenance to child vaccinations, right? And everything in the middle. Noxious weed, invasive species, food policy, there is a whole lot that's in that spectrum of government. And so they create boards and a structure of boards to have people that specialize based on their interest on that particular area. And they're going to think about, they're going to worry about, they're going to engage the public over, and they're going to make advice or give advice back to the elected officials to then make decisions on behalf of the whole community on that variety of ideas and issues that they have to address. So that's why there's such a vast amount of boards that are tapping into the expertise of the community to provide advice and support back to the county commission or the city council to make decisions on behalf of the community. So that's the kind of your role. And so we're operating within some sort of an overall structure, right? And so let me go down this path. What was the most exciting thing that happened in the state of Montana in 1972? I like asking that question because this year is the anniversary, what was it, 6 weeks ago was the anniversary of the signing of that 1972 Constitution. That was kind of a big deal for us as a state. And I don't have the time to give you the whole history. It's a fascinating discussion, but 72 Constitution. Now, when we come together as a state and we said, look, we're going to create a constitution. In that constitution, we're going to describe our rights as Montanans. We're going to talk about what is it that we value. We're going to define the structure of government and their role in providing these essential services and the process by which we're going to mediate our differences. It's kind of spelled out in this big overarching vision and value statement that we've created as a state. This is what's important to us, and this is how we want government to function. 72-page document that can be in a little pamphlet this big.
Dan, did you turn your mic off by accident? I can grab you another one.
Oh, it's green again. Is that better? Oh, there we are. Okay, where was I? Oh, okay, so who gets it after that? Any guesses? The legislature. And what do they do with it? So they take this relatively small document, but powerful in its expression, and the legislature gets it and they create the state code or the Montana Code annotated. So we're going to ignore my fulcrum here and our balancing act. But so the legislature gets it and they're going to create the Montana Code annotated. And that's the state law. The idea here is that they're going to create this framework by which we're going to operate. They're going to take these ideals in the Constitution and give us something that we can say, okay, we have enumerated authorities and powers and a framework to operate from. But so far, I'll say that they haven't really drilled down within these state statutes to where they're micromanaging you. They're not telling your board exactly when to meet, where to meet, and what time to meet, right? They're leaving it to the local jurisdiction to decide that. They've taken it to a certain point and said, okay, we're giving a county authority to create boards that provide a public service. And there's this framework by which they create these boards, and you're going to operate within that framework. Okay, but it's up to the local folks to develop it. Like we were just talking before we started here about a food policy committee. There's no other food policy board that I'm aware of in the state, but there is a nexus of a public need and the powers given to them by the legislature that allow these local governments to create that, right? Just because another municipality or county doesn't have it doesn't mean it's not a good thing. It's what's right for Missoula and Missoula County, right? So we have that baked in, this flexibility to be able to be responsive to the needs of our local community. So what works well in Richland County and Sidney, Montana may not work well in Missoula and Missoula County. But let Richland County be Richland County and Missoula County be Missoula County. That's my philosophy. We good at that, Campbell? I'm looking for validation from Campbell. So how far has my life gone spiraling out of control? All right. So we have the state law, and in the state law, they will say, hey, we need to have you create your local policies. Now, I'm going to look in our IES. I apologize if my handwriting is sloppy and my spelling is not great. Turn in your packet. There's a right-hand pocket and a left-hand pocket, and in those pockets, there's a packet, and they're labeled right-hand, left-hand packet. So folks at home, just look for the one that says left-hand packet. I'm interested in looking at page L1. And at the top of page L1, this is the state constitution, Article 2, which represents our Declaration of Rights. So there's a whole bunch of rights that we've enumerated in our constitution, one of which, or three of which, I want to touch on here. That's the right to know, the right to participate, and the right to privacy. And they're not very long, these rights. They've just used a single sentence to enumerate these rights. So here it says the right to participate. And I'm going to read these to you because this is the framework, and philosophically, you've got to understand, what does the Constitution say? And how does what the Constitution say? How do I translate in my behavior and the operations of our board and reflect the Constitution? Right. So there's a principle here that we want to make sure we're adhering to the principle, and then the law that we'll discuss, and the law is going to give you a very specific framework to operate in. When are you consistent with the law? When are you outside of the law? So basically it says the right to participate. The public has a right to expect governmental agencies to afford such reasonable opportunity for citizen participation in the operation of the agency prior to final decision as may be provided by law. So a couple things there. They're saying that the citizens of Montana, the people of Montana, have a right to participate in your deliberations and comment prior to making final action, right? So that was not the case prior to 1972. The legislature used to meet in committee meetings. They'd have the public come in and say their thing, then they'd kick them all out, and then they would have their own deliberations and make their vote in secret. That's how we ran in the state of Montana. So if you think about the pendulum swinging from that kind of environment way over to say, no, that's not working for us. That's too opaque. We want to be transparent. We want to be open. So there's a value that we have as Montanans. We want to see the sausage being made. We want to see the deliberations. We'll get to that in a second. We want to be able to participate and comment on the actions that you're contemplating. The next one, the right to know. No person shall be deprived of the right to examine documents or to observe the deliberations of all public bodies or agencies of state government and its subdivisions, except in the case in which the demand of individual privacy clearly exceeds the merits of public disclosure. So now they're talking about you have this right to observe and to examine documents. We want to see what's behind the curtain, so to speak, except when there's a conflict between the public's right to know and an individual's right to privacy, which is the last one there. The right of individual privacy is essential to the well-being of a free society and shall not be infringed without the showing of a compelling state interest. So here's that fulcrum again. We're balancing, potentially your board may be balancing, how do we want to manage two constitutional rights that find themselves in conflict? Library board, for example, or the fire district folks, you have an employee, the fire board or a sewer and water district, right? You're an employee of this water sewer district. You're a board member, will be, Yeah, and you're a board member who employs the library director. So that's a direct employee of the board. So to do an evaluation of that employee, there is a consideration of their right to privacy. And so the public has a right to know, but that individual has a right to privacy. So now here we are on this fulcrum saying, okay, we've got to balance whose constitutional right are we going to violate? Are we going to violate this individual's constitutional right to privacy and allow that meeting to be open while we do the evaluation? Or are we going to violate the public's right to know, close the meeting and conduct that in private? And so there's a framework in the law that explains to us how we conduct that process. And you can even refine that more by creating your policies locally that very specifically says this is how the Missoula Library Board is going to conduct its evaluation of its employee, right? Which will be consistent with what the law says. Again, the law is going to be kind of that, this is a 30,000-foot view, here's your 10,000-foot view, and your local policies right down in the weeds. What are we going to do in our organization on that issue? All right, and then, so there's the Constitution. Now, the legislature meets, and they remember the section at the where it says "as may be provided by law." That's throwing it out to the legislature. Say, hey, legislature, create laws that govern the right to participate. So what they did is they sat down and said, okay, we're going to translate that one sentence into a structure and a framework for how open or meetings are going to be conducted. So we're ensuring that the public has a right to participate. So that one sentence turns into, I don't know, 4 pages of statute. And then, so let's just read that. Let's look down on the bottom of page L1, 23103, the bottom third. It says each agency shall develop procedures for permitting and encouraging the public to participate in the agency's decisions that are of significant interest to the public. So you need to develop procedures that not only permit the public to participate, but what's the other thing that they're asking you to do? Encourage. So now you have a statutory expectation to encourage participation. Was that one of our questions up here? Outreach, right? That there is a statutory expectation that you're just not going to tell them this is when and where we're meeting and we're going to unlock the door, but you're also going to reach out and encourage their participation. That's just the first sentence. But you're going to develop procedures, which means you're going to need to develop local policies that define when and where we're meeting, the structure, the agenda, how are we going to conduct public comment, where on the agenda is public comment going to be, who's in control of developing the agenda, who's going to be responsible for noticing the meeting, where are we going to put the notices of the meeting. All those things are going to be outlined in policy where you're not relying upon the legislature to define that for you, but they're saying, hey, look, you need to develop procedures locally that ensure all these boxes are checked on the local level. And you can do it in your context. Second sentence says, the procedures must ensure adequate notice and assist public participation before final agency action is taken that is of significant interest to the public. So now you need to ensure adequate notice, and again, what's the next word? Assist. So not only are you going to be encouraging the public to participate, but the legislature is also saying we want you to assist them in participating. So in 2 sentences, 2 very much action-oriented expectations placed on the local board to reach out to the public. The idea, again, is being that we don't want you just to kind of meet and conduct business without engaging the public, that the public wants to very much be involved in that process. Again, you're here to facilitate on behalf of the public what they need done for themselves. Okay, now legislature, bless their hearts. Here they kind of punted, where they're using the term, the procedures must ensure adequate notice. So you need to notice adequately the public when and where you're meeting. So who's willing to define for every person in Montana what is adequately noticed? Right? So it's kind of hard, right? So I'm sure if we look at just clearly, you look like a person that needs 2 weeks notice, a letter in the mail, someone knocking on your door saying, hey, come to the meeting, where you tweet it out, give me 4 hours and I'm there, right? So what might be adequate for one clearly is not adequate for another. So as a board, I want to make sure I'm compliant with the Constitution and the law, but I'm not sure where adequate notice is. What is enough time? Where's the line, basically? So you ask your county attorney or your city attorney, and they're going to say, I don't know. So they're going to ask other city and county attorneys. They're going to say, we don't know. So who would they ask that could give them a definitive answer? What did the legislature mean when they said adequate notice? Okay, so the Supreme Court, through the form of a lawsuit, right? You just don't ask the court, hey, I've got a question. But what happens is we're going to say it's 4 hours, and you're going to say, that's not adequate. I don't think that's adequate. I don't think that's consistent with the law or the intent of the law. So I'm going to sue the city or the county or the board because I don't feel I was adequately noticed at 4 hours. And then we go to the court and we appeal all the way up to the Supreme Court and they'll say, yeah, that's adequate or not. Likely may not tell you what is adequate, but they'll just say, yeah, that's not it. So the Supreme Court or the court system is one outlet. What's another one? How about Montana's Attorney General? Attorney General, one of the roles of the Attorney General is to give opinions. An opinion, and so that's exactly what happened in this case. The city and county attorneys requested an opinion from the Attorney General saying, hey, we're not sure what adequate is, how to define that for a length of time. We don't want to violate someone's constitutional right, and we certainly don't want to be sued because that's going to be a compromise of the public's trust in us, and we don't want to go through the court system. It's expensive and it's messy. Can you just give us a determination? What does the legislature mean when they said adequate notice? And in that case, it was Missouri in 1989 said, any guess what this said? How much notice are you giving right now? Hopefully, it's always a danger when I ask this question. What kind of notice are you giving right now? Because it may be, anybody know? Oh, you guys are. And so how far in advance do you publish when your meeting meets, when your group meets? Yeah.
I know the city strikes for 72 hours.
Okay, so there may be policy that the city says 72 hours, and that's what we'd like to have. We want to have ample opportunity. The Attorney General says 48 hours would be sufficient notice prior to contemplated final action. But that time should increase with the relative importance of the decision being made. Clearing up ambiguity with a little bit more ambiguity. It's just we've never really been pressured on that last part. The reason is if where are we at? So the fire board's contemplating the purchase of a fire truck. That's a big deal. But they likely aren't just showing up at a meeting with only 48 hours and making that decision at that first meeting. It's likely something that's been contemplated, discussed on multiple meeting agendas. So there's been ample discussion and engagement around that issue before they make that significantly high decision. That's really bad discussion. Or, yeah, you get the point. So usually it's not a problem. So when you are planning to meet, you need to make sure that there's adequate notice, and the Attorney General gives us 48 hours of guideline to make sure that that's noticed. And it's not just that we're meeting Thursday night at 7 o'clock at the Moise, is that what you call it, the Moise room? So that's part of it, where and when. The other part of your notice is what it is that you plan to talk about. The public needs to be noticed of what the decisions you're going to be making. So you need to have your agenda prepared and noticed out to the public. These are the things that we're discussing so that you as a citizen or the citizens say, oh, I'll come and participate because some of those things on that agenda interest me. And I want to see, so that part of it is in order to be enabled to participate, you need to know what is happening. So there's an expectation that you're going to notice the public of what you're going to hear, discuss, or act on. Does that make sense so far? We'll delve more into this, and it'll all become crystal clear by 5 o'clock. Third sentence, and it's like, Dan, are you going to do every sentence? Yes, every sentence. So the third sentence of that section, the agenda for a meeting must include an item allowing public comment on any public matter that is not on the agenda of the meeting and that is within the jurisdiction of the agency conducting the meeting. Now, the first section, the first sentence in that was you need to allow the public an opportunity to comment prior to final action. Okay, so that's one part of public comment. There's another then public comment that you need to allow the public to comment on anything that's not on the agenda, but within your jurisdiction. Right, so what else? This is how that engagement that you're going to have with the public, for them to come in and weigh in and say, yeah, I know what you want to talk about, but here's some things that we want to talk about. That somewhat defines that public agenda and the public process, that feedback. So allowing the public to comment prior to on things that are not on the agenda. However, the agency may not take action on any matter discussed unless specific notice of that matter is included on an agenda and public comment has been allowed on that matter. So they're consistent in their thought process. If someone brings up an issue, you can't immediately take that issue up, discuss it, and take action on it, because now the public hasn't had an opportunity to be noticed of it and participate and observe the deliberations and comment on that contemplated idea. You can have a discussion about, oh, well, let's put this on a future meeting agenda, and you could take action on putting on a future meeting agenda. I call that an administrative action. But you're not going to have a substantive discussion about that issue until the public's been able to be noticed and participate in it. Right? Is that efficient? If your only interest is getting stuff done, it's not efficient. But if your interest is facilitating the process on behalf of the public, I don't know of a better, more efficient way to do it. Right? So if you're there serving on behalf of the public, facilitating on their behalf these needs and interests and concerns they have, then they need to be part of that equation. So there's a philosophy behind our structure of government in Montana. And I'll tell you, not all states have that philosophy. There are some states is like, wow, how do you guys do anything? Because everything's so open and transparent. I said, yeah, that's how we roll in Montana. All right. So there's a logic and a flow and a sequence to this. Procedures. You need to develop these procedures for permitting and encouraging the public to participate. For those of you that do not have rules of procedure or bylaws for your board, we have somewhere on the right-hand packet, page R3, we have created a boilerplate set of rules of procedure for you. What should be minimally contained within your rules of procedure and what would meet statutory expectations. So that's what we have here. So if you have rules of procedure that you can put your hands on and say, well, yeah, here's our bylaws. And I use rules of procedure and bylaws interchangeably, if that confuses you. Here's our bylaws. This is what we're operating from. This is our local board's governing document. Well, I would suggest you take this boilerplate and just say, oh, do we have that covered? Do we have this? Because you might find some things in this boilerplate that are not contained in your bylaws, and you can enhance and improve your bylaws by adding that. So so we'll just leave it at that. So that's, and we set this up as a boilerplate with a water sewer district. So half your work's done for you right there. Yeah. So again, this is a statutory expectation, right? It says that you shall develop procedures. So if you don't have bylaws, here's the thing is, how else can you be held accountable for your process? If someone sues you because they don't think you followed the law, and the first thing your lawyer is going to ask, the first thing the court's going to ask is, let's see your rules of procedure. And did you follow your rules of procedure? And are they consistent with the law? And they say, we don't have them. And then they're going to say, well, you need to by law. And it doesn't look like your behavior was consistent with the expectations of the law, so you'll be found wanting. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so a question about bylaws. If bylaws applies, who does that? Is that the board collectively, leadership of the board? Is that a public process? Especially if your board is created out of an ordinance, like designating.
Yeah. So procedurally, so it's pretty open. There's no real guidance coming from the state legislature and the MCA saying this is how this should happen. So a lot of it's going to be on that local level. My guess is that's not something that the city or county has as a policy. And a board serving on our behalf, if you ever want to update your bylaws, this is how you do it. Sometimes they'll include in the bylaws how a process by which you update. It might be on there on a timetable. Every 5 years, we're going to review this. They might create a subcommittee. The board itself might do it. It might be the board chair goes off and makes a run at it and then comes back with track changes and said, here's my proposed things, and we debate it. The key is that it's going to have to be debated amongst the group and allow the public to weigh in on that. So you think about all the decisions we've been making. Libraries, how libraries are structured in the state of Montana. Public board, the Board of Health, how that's structured. That was all created and debated in the state, created by the legislature, right? So the democratic process, we're weighing in and they're going to reflect those interests in that process and canonize that in our statutes. Doesn't mean that the legislature then, fast forward, isn't going to go in there and say, hey, we're going to change this. There's a need for us to change this, and they'll go through that process again. So that's where I see those bylaws as kind of a dynamic, dynamic framework. You may be operating as a board really well, great dynamics. Everyone's engaged, everyone's participating. The tension, you've got healthy tension that's going to create really good outcomes, but not not overdone or where it's become negative, where it becomes a hot mess, right? Some boards, well, what happens is you're just one appointment or one election away from having a hot mess, right? That you get someone that comes in and says, hey, I'm not willing to play by your rules, or I'm here representing a particular constituency, and my constituency is all about just being a human blender, and I'm just going to stir everything up. Now, what you'll find is, how do we manage that? We're interested in good input, we're good process, we want to have good discussion, we want a variety of opinions represented here, but we want it to be healthy, not disruptive. And so you may find yourselves needing to create additional bylaws to manage that, and it's very difficult for you to anticipate what that crisis is going to look like. So then what you're finding yourself is having to create policies on how to manage behavior of board members in the midst of a hot mess, conflicted environment. So oftentimes what will happen is a board will kind of limp through that process. They'll come out on the other side and say, whew, that was terrible, but we got through it. We're in a good place now. What I would suggest is then you canonize that in your bylaws. What do you need to do to fix that? How would we go through a process to fix that in the future if it were to happen again? Is that making sense for people? I think they're intended to be dynamic. You add to them as you need. And there may be things that show up. 4-H councils are great about this. They like to make lots of rules and regulate behavior of everybody. And then pretty soon that becomes in a conflict. And so then they have to start repealing things to, and a lot of it's the dynamics of the personalities of the board. And so you'll have that reflected. And so I'm going to pick on a town not far from here, and I won't mention its name, but it's Hamilton. If you ask the folks in Hamilton to see their policy on how to get something placed on the city council meeting agenda for a council member, right? I facilitated I'll say I mediated a discussion with their mayor and their city council. It must have been 15, 16 years ago. And because they had a commission, a council and the mayor that were at odds with each other, and it became this big thing. They have an 8-page document on how to get something as a council member onto the agenda. That was the outcome, is an 8-page document just on agenda creation. You ask them today, they don't even know that they have an 8-page document because they've been able to get through that rough patch. Now they're much more amicable about how they behave, and they don't even know they have a policy. But they have one on the books. It's 8 pages long, which is ridiculous, right? It shouldn't be that difficult. But personalities involved, it took them 8 pages to be able to negotiate out a process that everybody could agree with. All right. And Hamilton's doing much better now. They had a dark period there. They've grown out of it. It seems to rolled over to Stevensville. They're seeming to be coming out of it now. Darby's starting to kick in. So there's something about Ravalli County. We'll just say that. I'm sure I've offended everybody online about Ravalli County now. What's that? Yeah, it's YouTube, yeah. Last thing on this, the last couple sentences here. Public comment received at a meeting must be incorporated into the official minutes of the meeting. Incorporated, I don't necessarily see as word for word or verbatim, but just what's the issue that was presented before the council, because that's helpful. It's a helpful record to have. Meeting minutes, by the way, are a record of your meeting. We'll talk about that more on that when we get to that section of the code, but it's those records are kept for perpetuity. Right now, there is no retention policy. They are kept forever. And so that's important to know that you should have a record of your meeting minutes. They should be retained, and each city and county has a records retention policy, and they have a records officer. And for boards that serve on the county level, statutorily, they added the statute, and I think it might be in your handout, that you need to turn in your meeting minutes to the clerk and recorder 30 days after their approval. Does that sound familiar? Hopefully it does. Any other questions you have yet on? Yeah, I've got to update this handout. It's supposed to be on the last page, L20 73204 or 71204 is the statute. So apparently we need to update that handout. But that's where it says that if you ever want to look it up, 71204, it talks about turning in those meeting minutes to the clerk and recorder. The reason why, if you think about it, the reason why is that's a central repository. So doesn't matter what board you're interested in getting meeting minutes. You don't have to go to the sewer district person, the fire district, and over here to this place and try to gather up the meeting minutes. You can go to the courthouse and you can get all the meeting minutes that you want. That's kind of the idea. Make it more accessible and easy for the public. Okay, so that's so there are two. I just want to hammer this home a little bit for you, in that there are two forms of public comment. Comment on the agenda and comment not on the agenda, but within your jurisdiction. The important part is where you place those on the agenda. You can't place public comment on the agenda at the end of the meeting. Why is that? Because you've already made the decision, and now you say, okay, now the decision's done, go ahead and comment on it, right? But the Constitution says you need to allow comment prior to final action, right? So you have that right to participate prior to final action. So on your agenda, it is important that you allow the public to comment prior to any sort of wrapping of the gavel. Allow the public to comment. So what we would recommend is you allow public comment on agenda at the beginning of the meeting. Now, again, the legislature doesn't tell you exactly where to put public comment. They're leaving that up to you, just making sure you adhere to the principles that they've outlined in the statute. If you wanted to, you could put public comment at the beginning of the meeting and say, here's your chance to say anything you want to on the meeting, and they say, great, that's done, we're moving on. Or what a lot of jurisdictions will do, or boards will do, is they'll have public comment with each agenda item. So they'll talk about the agenda item, they'll get some sort of the fire chief will get up there and say, here, we're going to purchase this new piece of equipment, this is what it's going to cost, this is why we're doing it, here's our capital improvement plan, this is how it fits, we're going to retire this vehicle to add this apparatus. All that context is out there. And then the board is given a chance to ask questions, clarification, and then you can allow public comment. Now the public is then informed, they know what's going on. Instead of just seeing that purchase of new fire truck, right? They're showing up because of that agenda item, but they want to know a little bit of the context. So if you allowed them to comment on the agenda at the very beginning of the meeting without all that extra comment, they might be asking a whole lot of questions that would be covered during that agenda item. So that's why a lot of jurisdictions will then move their public comment with each agenda item so that they can allow the public to understand the issue, have the context, and hear any Q&A between the board and the expert, whether it's a staff member or an engineer or an architect, the fire chief, the operator, the library director, whoever it is giving that report, and then they can comment on it, which then informs the board to take that input along with the report and then try to craft what their motion's going to be. Is that making sense in that sequence? So you could do this, but it's more common to do it like this. And then you could also put public comment not on agenda, but within jurisdiction at the beginning. Or what's more common is they'll do it down here at the end. So you start out the meeting with public comment, and at the end you say, okay, now is there anything else that's not on our agenda you want to talk about? That's typical to do it that way, but it's not required. Again, this is what you can put in your rules of procedure or your bylaws. And so we have I think it's a terrible, but I need to fix it, but I don't have the time. The agenda in our proposed bylaws, our sample or boilerplate bylaws, you can create your own agenda, but it's nice to be able to, here's the deal, is put it in your bylaws, and then all you do as a board is execute what's in your bylaws. You've had the discussion, you've made the decision, this is how we're going to operate our meetings. So when somebody joins the board and say, well, I want to do it different, you say, well, okay, well then there's a process. We're going to do things different. So we've got to change our bylaws because we are going to operate consistent with our bylaws. And we've already had this discussion. We've come up with what we feel is the best strategy for our organization to operate this way. And so we've locked it in. So now you don't have to think about how do we structure and organize every meeting because it's already been decided for you once. Then you can spend your energy, instead of fighting over process, spend your energy on content. What is it we're going to do? Why are we here? We want to talk about food policy. We don't want to talk about governing process. That's not why I'm volunteering my time. It's for this, so that's not my expertise. So that's why a lot of boards like to create this, get it done, and so we have that structure set up, and then we have this way we just operate, and we can spend my mental energy and my time on doing the things that my expertise is around.
I know it probably doesn't really matter, but do you have a preference or do you have a recommendation for it by agenda after the vote?
That's a great question. Great question.
Could you repeat the question?
So the question is, where do you place the public comment relative to the motion? Right. So here's my take on it. But bottom line is, you can do whatever you want as long as you're allowing it before final action. Having said that, I have a logical sequence by why I would argue where to place it. So what I was just describing there is you have some sort of an informational presentation, right? This is why we're doing it. This is, it's being presented, some sort of report. And then a question and answer period by the board asking questions of the expert, right? So there'd be the fire, I like to pick on fire districts, right? Because they'll put on their agenda, fire truck. What does that mean, right? As a member of the public, do you feel adequately noticed what the board is contemplating when they just put on the agenda fire truck? Probably not, right? Are you painting it? Are you fixing it? Are you throwing it away? What do we do with the fire truck? So it could be argued that fire truck is not sufficient or not adequate notice to the public. But if they put on their purchase of used 2007 International 2.5-ton pumper truck for $38,000, do you think the public's adequately noticed now? Yeah. So now they know what the contemplated action is, right? Which is important. If you have that level of detail on your agenda, the public kind of knows what direction you're headed in. Plus, this is a discussion they've been having for the last 6-8 months, or maybe years, as they're looking at their fleet and apparatuses and they're changing their capital improvement plan and all that stuff. So it's been an ongoing discussion in that district. So you have the informational, oh, here's the other thing. Now, somebody in town or in your district, because everything you read on Facebook is true and accurate, just to get that out there. But someone's out there putting on Facebook that they're contemplating to buy some blah, 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 blah thing. And it's got everybody wound up. It's wildly inaccurate. If they all show up at the meeting with pitchforks and torches, ready to just say, you guys are crazy, we're going to recall every last one of you, because you're going to be buying this wild, crazy, wacky piece of apparatus. If you do public comment here at the beginning of the meeting, you're going to hear 2.5 hours of people yelling about something that is not true or accurate or consistent with what your plan is. So rather than doing that, if you had a public comment each, you can say at the beginning of the meeting, say, look, when we get to agenda item number 4, we'll give you plenty of time to comment. Get to that spot, you do the informational presentation by the chief, You're asking questions as a board, anticipating what are the concerns of the public. And so I'm going to ask a question that is going to help further the understanding of the public, even if the fire chief addressed it. I'm going to ask it again just to make sure and double down on what is it exactly what we're going to do. And then I'm going to allow public comment. Now, draw a line there. And then after the public comment is done, then we're going to ask for a motion and then discussion by the board, discussion, and then take action. Let's be here. All right, now I draw the line here. So this is my rationale. If they're adequately noticed of what we're contemplating doing, they know the direction we're headed in, particularly when you're doing a good informational presentation. I draw the line here because this is where the public process is complete, right? So this process is the public process. This process is the deliberative process of that body that's been, whose stewardship is to act on behalf of the public. That would be my argument. Some jurisdictions I know will place the right here, with the argument being is the public doesn't know what the motion is. Well, I think if you're doing a good job up here, it's pretty clear what the motion is. And it might allow the public, the motion to be framed as a result of the public comment. And how empowering is that for the public to feel like, particularly it's like, well, and we're going to pay for this fire truck over the next 10 years. And it might come from that comments, and that's too much of a burden. Why don't we push it off for 15 years? You know, it's going to cost a little bit more, but it's going to be less for the, you know, there might be a logical rationale. It's like, yeah, okay, we're going to modify our motion to accommodate that type of input from the public. Or that we as a board, we've thought about the 10-year finance plan or the 15-year finance plan. We chose 10-year for this piece of logic, but based on the input from the public, we'll jump back to 15. You know, what point being is you're being somewhat responsive. Does that help? That's my rationale. But I know others, you know, it's fine. And again, just put it in your policy. You've got it, put it down here in your policy. But that's, so now that, because you get a new yahoo like me, why are we doing this? Well, if you'd like to change it, Dan, there's a process. Let's have a discussion, let's debate it, right? And it might be some change in some other things, and we'll adopt a new way of doing it. Okay. Is this good? Yes, sir. Here. I would prefer, yeah. Yep. Yep. Yeah. Your opportunity on the agenda is here. Yeah. Yes. You can lose control of a meeting really quick. Here's the other thing. As a board, the public has a right to comment. If the public chooses to use their comment time period to ask you 50 questions, that's fine. You're not compelled or required to respond to their questions. You are there to hear what they have to say. Now, that doesn't mean that you just turn off, dead eyes, and I'm just going to endure this 20 minutes while you sit and yell at us. That's not helpful either. So I would encourage you to be active listening, engage, lean in, and try to hear what they're having and what they're saying. What is the essence of what they're saying, and is there a way that we can reflect that? Or how do we, in our minds, square the decision-making process we're going to go through with the concerns of our community, right? What I don't like to see is we go through this public comment process as just a check in the box. Decisions made, I know which direction I'm going. I'm going to sit through this and endure this whatever time period, and then we're going to go over here and make our decision, irregardless of what you have to say. Now, what I would suggest you do is during this part here, during the discussion, is where you're going to articulate to the public, I hear your concerns. I hear your concerns about our ability to finance and pay upfront for all this, whatever it is. But my concern is the future. Or I hear your concern about the future, so why don't we do something about the here and now? Whatever, but you're giving a rationale behind your decision. I think you owe that to the public, the worst thing I see, what bothers me, I guess not the worst, what bothers me is it's a highly controversial issue. You've got a room full of people that are anxious about this decision. You go through this whole process, you make the motion, and it's crickets. No one says anything, and then they take action on it. It's like, well, wait a minute. You just made a significant decision on our behalf, and you have no justification, rationale, thought process behind that, no argument, no sway, no, this is why I'm making this decision for these reasons. I think we owe that to our public, why we're making the decision on their behalf. And it helps, and when they walk away, there's a couple things that will happen. If you don't say anything, they're wondering then, if you're not talking here, where are you talking, right? Are you violating the open meeting law, having discussions and making the decision ahead of, and this is just all theater. Now you just, rewind back to 1958 Montana. We've moved beyond that, right? So we're in this era of transparency and openness. And then the other thing, here's the other thing. The Facebook folks, you got a room full of people because they read something on Facebook. Where's the credibility in the room? The credibility lies with the people on Facebook. If you can go through a good process, help the people understand, and they might walk out there. They may walk out of there. Sorry, I don't know. They may walk out of the meeting not liking the answer, but understanding the answer, understanding why. I don't like it because it means I've got to sacrifice a little bit, but I get it. The credibility is going to shift from them online, the trolls out there, to you. That, oh, it's not what I heard online. It's actually this. Well, that seems pretty reasonable. That makes sense. It seems like they're working hard on this. They've been studying this for a long time. They've got a plan. It's not what I was led to believe, what I read on Facebook. And I think you can shift that credibility from the anonymous stuff going out there online to, no, this is where democracy happens right here, right? In our community, I'm one of you, you're one of us. Any one of you could be sitting in this seat making this decision on behalf of our community. Just happens to be it's my rotation on the seat. There are some towns, there's counties, literally, that is the case. It's a rotation. 400 people in that county, your turn's going to be up next. All right. Is that helping? Go ahead. Yeah, so this period here is through that discussion is where you realize, maybe we, in our debate, we realize, oh, maybe we want to change something about our motion. Maybe it's not, I was thinking one thing and now I've heard a different opinion. It's like, ooh, maybe we do want to make a tweak to our motion. So that's where you make your amendments and all those things to really go through that. And it's a time where I know there's going to be a split vote on this issue. And it gives me an opportunity to sway my fellow board members and provide my rationale, my thinking, and try to bring them onto my side of understanding the future, the purpose, the cause, whatever. And likewise, they're going to be doing the same back to me. And so that this is the richness. This is where the community square happens, where we all come together and we debate. It just so happens, instead of doing this in a big town hall where we all show up at the high school gym and yell at each other, we've delegated or through elections or appointment people to do that on our behalf. And the public then has an opportunity to participate in this up until a point where they say, okay, now we're giving it over to this group of people to make that decision. Yeah. It's exciting stuff. It gets me all excited and jazzed up. So but I'm a nerd, clearly. I've got red shoes. So, all right, so there's that. Any other thoughts or questions on that flow or sequence? Yeah. Yes, and put that in your bylaws. So here's a couple pointers for you in your bylaws or rules of procedure in that I would suggest that you don't limit the amount of time that any one person can speak to less than 3 minutes, because they're given an opportunity to comment. And so what is the law says? It has a qualifier. Significant interest of the public. And so the argument is, what they'll argue is that this is a significant interest to the public, and you're only giving me a minute and a half to say something. It's a particular land use issue. You're giving the developer an hour to give his presentation, and me as a person who's going to be impacted by that for here into eternity, a minute and a half? That's not right. And so then you'll be pressured. So most city and county attorneys have debated, and they said, look, 5 minutes is great. If you want to limit it to 5 minutes, but no less than 3. So make sure you're not making it less than 3, because then you're inviting a lawsuit. And the last thing you want to be is the jurisdiction that got sued, that goes to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says, nah, you can't limit the amount of time for public comment. This court might be okay with it, but previously I don't think the courts would have, I think they would have said you can't limit, which then takes that off the table. Because right now there is no AG opinion or other court case, or the law tells us otherwise. And then the other question about limiting the overall time. So do that with more caution. The legislature does it. They have their own rationale and reason. They make the laws. Expectation for us is that but yeah, you just read the room. It's not uncommon. Dan Kemmis, anybody know? Remember Dan Kemmis, former mayor, former of Missoula. He was the president of the Senate. Very competent, capable guy. He used to say, all right, who's here that wants to speak on behalf of this issue? And they'd raise their hand and say, how much time do you folks think you need to get your point across? Oh, we want 45 minutes. I said, I'll give you a half hour. Who wants to speak in opposition to this? And he'd negotiate with the groups and say, okay, now we're gonna recess for 15 minutes. You guys figure out what you want to say. You figure out what you want to say. We're gonna have 15 minutes each, and we'll start back in 15 minutes. Right? And so it allowed them a chance. Now, right, wrong, I don't know. Has it been ever tested in courts? No, it hasn't yet. So just be cautious. Yes, ma'am.
About a meeting time, is it appropriate to have a boundary like we need 2 hours and that's it?
That's another way in which you can look at your agenda and say, how much time is it going to take us to get through our agenda? And then you want to bake in, what is it going to take for public comment? Yeah, so I'm not going to say you can't limit the overall amount of time for public comment. What you can do in your rules, ground rules, well, I'll have to circle back to those here in a second, is as the chair, if you've heard that issue before, you can really encourage the people making public comment. If your point has been made, know that we've heard it and we don't need to hear it again. Public comment is not a public vote. Right, I always frustrates me in the papers like, oh, there's 78 people who are speaking in favor of this and only 2 against. Well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because if those 78 people all said the same thing, and we address that thing, it's taken care of, right? So it's hearing those unique perspectives is what we're looking for. So you can try to encourage it, particularly as the chairs, try to encourage that to say, hey, if it's already been heard, you can always say, hey, I agree with what that person said, and sit down. To try to give them a chance to say, yeah, I want to be counted, right? So part of it, we want to encourage participation. The other part of it is, it's like we want to do it in a timely manner. So there's these, where's my fulcrum, right? So you're trying to balance those things, right? So we're not here till 2 in the morning, because no good decision happens after 2, or well, no. My parents told me after 9. So be home at 9 o'clock, because no good decision happens after 9 p.m. But yeah, so we want to balance that, and yeah.
Split it into more than one.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's a public hearing that's going to go.
Yeah. So that's another way which you can move that out, start earlier in the day, take a recess. There's a lot of things that you can do to try to keep it fresh. And if you keep encouraging, yeah, we've heard that, instead of hearing the same thing over and over, we're looking for unique input and try to encourage that. It sometimes helps. Other thoughts? Questions? There was something you were asking about earlier. Nope. Somebody else, you didn't say it, he just killing time.
It's actually on that.
Maybe it's you.
No.
Okay.
How do we encourage all perspectives? So oftentimes in a public meeting, you get the loudest voices are those in opposition, right? For whatever reason, right? It could be rational, it could be irrational, but the loudest voices are opposition. And we do a lot of public scoping and then public comment on draft plans for decision making. And in general, the majority of comments that we receive and the majority of public comment received in open meetings are in opposition to those motions because of something that somebody doesn't like.
Yeah.
How do we encourage all perspectives? Because I would guarantee that the majority of the community, maybe I'm generalizing here, is in support of the direction that we're moving in, even if they're not informed about the decision that we're actively making in that.
Yeah, these are real challenges that we have in this process, right? And it would be ideal if everybody would show up, you know, like a mandatory community meeting around whatever, right? It's so that, and we often will operate on the assumption that, well, if the public didn't like it, they would show up and tell us they didn't like it. That's why the people that are showing up are saying, yeah, we want you to go this direction, where the rest of the community says, no, we're happy with the direction you're going in. That's an assumption on our part, right? They're not showing up because they're in favor of it. And so those that don't, you know, part of what you could do is, and there's nothing, I don't think there's anything wrong with recruiting people to come to the meeting, particularly those varying perspectives, even the ones that don't necessarily agree with you or with what you're proposing. But reach out to people in the community and say, hey, look, I think it'd be important, your perspective would be very much valued in the public square to have this conversation. And I would encourage you to come and share your thoughts on this, because we as a board need to hear your ideas and your perspective, as well as the rest of the community needs to hear that, right? So that could be a way in which you're reaching out, right? Remember when it talked about to encourage, and that was the other word, encourage and assist, right? So that could go in that categories. How are we going to assist the public to participate? Because we really need in this democratic process of lots of perspectives, right? And that's what's going to make a more durable outcome when and it's not going to happen in one meeting. It might take several of these meetings in a row to make the decision that's going to have all those perspectives represented. So that's kind of your responsibility, is how do we make the best decision for the most people? If we don't know what most of the people are thinking, it makes it hard for you. So yeah, no easy answer, but other than trying to encourage and recruit people to show up and say, your perspective would be very much valued by our board. And I'd encourage you to come and either send an email, you don't have to show up at the meeting. And I think now one of the things, careful what you say, Dan, an outcome of the pandemic was it allowed us to ramp up our technology and our comfort level with electronic. So by having your meetings hybrid could also allow more people to access and participate and provide their perspectives. It's a pain. It's a pain, but having this ability is, I thought we were 10 years out from doing this, and boom, right? It just happened. I didn't come off saying that a pandemic's great, right? I don't want you to think, but an outcome of that was this. So I want to cover really quickly, because, well, with me, nothing's really quick. 6 things are required for a legal meeting. 6 criteria in order to have a legal meeting. What are those 6 things? Okay, so we have notice. What else? Quorum. Yep, it's 2. An agenda. Public comment. I always get a kick out of that, because right after this big long discussion about public comment, it's usually the last one to go on the board. Public. Okay, that's 4. We got one more. Very administrative. Minutes. And the last one, I won't make you guess because it's going to be hard. Turn the page L3. Top third. Oh, okay, this is how big of a nerd I am. All right. I have favorite sections of the law. I'm nerdy. This is one, and this is the other thing. This is one of my favorite sections of the law. 23201 So the legislative intent, the legislature finds and declares that public boards, commissions, councils, and other public agencies in this state exist to aid in the conduct of the people's business. It is the intent of this part that actions and deliberations of all public agencies shall be conducted openly. The people of the state do not wish to abdicate their sovereignty to the agencies which serve them. Towards these ends, the provisions of this part shall be liberally construed, which means if there's ever a question whether a meeting should be opened or closed, it should be liberally defined as being open. Transparency is the default. So, and again, the public does not wish to abdicate their sovereignty, is that they're not giving up their sovereignty, but they want to be very much involved in that. So again, this gives you a framework in your mind that there's the statutes and there's your local policies that as you're trying to create those that are going to reflect that intent, that openness, that transparency, that engagement, this listening through the public comment to shape and govern on behalf of the public. All right, so that's that. The next one is meeting defined. Using this part, meeting means the convening of a quorum of the constituent membership of a public agency, whether corporal or by means of electronic equipment. So either in person or connected electronically, to do three things: to hear, discuss, or act. So hear, discuss, or act. Now, why did I make or such a big deal in that phrase? Hear, discuss, or act. Is it just a throwaway word? No. Right. It could be any one of those three things and still be considered a meeting. So if you have a quorum, either connected either in person or electronically, and they're hearing or discussing or acting. So if it said and, if it was connected by and, it would have to be all three of them to happen in order for it to be a meeting. But the legislature chose the word or. Again, so if your board, a quorum of your board, which we might even have a quorum in the room and online, right? How big is your board? Okay, and I think we've got 4 in the room or 3? 3 and then 1 online, or just? Oh, whew. But which is not a big deal. A couple things. So I'll just off ramp here. Squirrel. If there were a quorum of your board here, for one thing, you're not hearing, discussing, or acting on something within your jurisdiction, right? We haven't talked at all about what you're doing. So not a problem in that technical sense. If someone were to walk by and say, "Ooh, I saw a quorum of the rah, rah, rah," and I'm going to sue you because I'm not happy in whatever, I'd like to do that. So they would not probably prevail in court because you're not hearing, discussing, or acting. Just because you're in the room. So say there's 4 of you are members of the same congregation, or your kids go to the same school and you're sitting at a PTA meeting or whatever. You can be in the same room as long as you're not doing one of those 3 things. The other thing you can do just to cover yourself is to notice a quorum of the board will be participating in a training, this date, time, place. No public issues will be discussed and no agency action will be taken. What you're basically saying is, we know that you know that we know that you know that there's a quorum here and we're all okay. Because even if you didn't like that fact, we've noticed it. If you really want to get technical, we could have public comment at this meeting and we could make minutes of it. So if your board needed minutes, you needed to allow public comment to meet all that criteria. We've never had to do that because we're not discussing your policy issues. We're discussing the governance and process stuff. So I don't think that's a violation of the open meeting law. But, or if you go off to a training or you're going to, yeah, we'll just say that. Question? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. No. So the Yeah, so here's another thing. So the question being for those in Zoomtopia is that if, and it's not uncommon, this is a very common practice that a board will say, hey, we're going to create a subcommittee. Part of it is for efficiency's sake, we want to, it's not going to we're not going to create a quorum on the board. And it's a way to kind of skirt around the open meeting law. Yeah, it's not, but it's how it's efficient. So here's the challenge, and I get what you're saying, and this happens quite frequently. You've got to, part of the expectation is in Montana's is we want to see the sausage being made. Great case here in Missoula County. There was contemplation of closing of I think some middle schools. There's going to be a middle school that was going to be closed. It was on the chopping block, and the school board created a subcommittee to just look at that. Well, they didn't want the public participating in that, because who wants to mediate that discussion? It's like, yeah, you can shut down any school you want, just not my school. And everyone's gonna fit. So they just went underground. And then they came out with a recommendation. And of course they got sued, and the court said, no, you can't create this group to make this important policy decision, right? You weren't making the final action. You're advising the board who took final action. But again, the public had a right to see the process and the criteria you're using to make your determination, your recommendation. Because you knew it didn't matter what the outcome was going to be, there was going to be a lawsuit. So they just unfortunately created an easy nexus for that to happen. So to the end of what you're asking there, if you look at, we haven't gotten to it, but it's 23203, the very next statute. And this is where meetings of certain associations exceptions. And this is where the open or the executive session or closed meetings discussion is. But if you look down bottom of number 6, which is not highlighted, which I need to add that, any committee or subcommittee appointed by a public body or association described in subsection 2 for the purpose of conducting business that is within the jurisdiction of the agency is subject to the requirements of this section. Bummer. Does that answer your question? So it's just not me telling you, thank goodness I have the law to back us up here. So that's what the expectation is, that they, at every level, and that's where it says in the code, it says in the Constitution, it talks about subdivisions of government, the state and its subdivisions, which would include local government, and then the subdivisions of local. So if you have a subcommittee, creates a subcommittee that creates a subcommittee, each one of those needs to make sure that they're noticing, taking minutes, allowing the public to comment, have an agenda, and a quorum is present. So it's kind of so it's not designed for efficiency. It's designed because the intent and its purpose is to facilitate on behalf of the public. So that's what drives the process, not how easily and quickly we can come from idea to decision. It's idea, public engagement, process, mediate, facilitate, then represent that in an outcome. Correct. Yes, you can still have as many subdivisions of government you want as long as you're meeting that criteria. So now each of those, and this is the other problem, is they're probably conducting a lot of that dialogue over email. Sharing articles back and forth, discussing what about this, I've been thinking about this. And that's the other concern, is that there's no way right now for us to meet electronically via email and allow the public to observe that, right? We can meet like this electronically, right? We can do that electronically, but you can't text message back and forth with the quorum of your governing body or subdivision of your governing body is hearing or discussing or taking action. And you're doing it electronically. You're having a meeting that you can't meet this other criteria. The public can't observe that emails.
So Dan, there is a question online about, do we need to be careful with daisy chains via email?
Yeah. So a daisy chain, or it's a rolling meeting where, okay, I'm going to go meet with you. I'm the board chair. I'm going to meet with you. We're going to talk, and I'm going to get your input, and I'm going to say, okay, now I was just talking to him, and this is what, and then I'm going to get the two of you. I'm going to go to you, and I'm going to start pulling all of that information forward with me. And so although we're not having a meeting where we're sitting down in the room, but we're discussing it, and I'm the linchpin that connects it all. You want to hear a court case on that? City, I won't tell you the name, but it's Dillon. They had the mayor and the council got crosswise over a public works project. And so the chairperson of the council wrote this letter, right? Wrote out this letter about how they were not happy with what was going on with the public works director, the city engineer, and the mayor. And then he went to each council member, read this. If you like what it says, sign it. And he went down the line with all the council members. 3 of them refused. So get off my porch, get away from me. I'm not looking at that letter, go away. But the rest of them signed it. And then they presented it at a city council meeting. And the mayor said, thank you. This will be exhibit A for the subsequent lawsuit. He says, I don't recall this letter ever being on an agenda. I don't, so the public was cut out. They had made a decision. They all agreed to that letter without having the discussion in public. It wasn't noticed. The public doesn't have it. So that's, and what ended up happening is the courts removed, I think, 3 of the 5 council members and said, you've lost your office because of official misconduct. You operated outside your coastal scope and outside the law. Just take a hike. The ones that said, we're not signing that, were not charged. So there's a statute, official misconduct, which you can, it's a civil penalty. It's not criminal. So it's civil. So you can get sued and be fined, and I think there's a 6-month jail sentence with it. So when you knowingly operate outside it's like, we're exercising power we don't have, but we're doing it anyway. Screw you, lawyers. That happens. Yeah. I don't know if, does that answer, get a thumbs up from that person, or let us know if that didn't answer the question. But yeah, you want to be careful of that, right? So again, the intent, the public has a right to participate and observe these deliberations. Makes it challenging for you as you're trying to manage complicated stuff on their behalf in a timely manner. So it's trying to balance all that, right? So having that framework, and as you think about how you structure your bylaws, that you're keeping that in mind. That help? It's probably not the answer you wanted to hear, but yeah, that's why you're here. Oh, you can. Yeah. Yeah. So another thing that you could do, so the other thing that you can do is say, hey, here's something I found, and send it out to the group, and we'll bring it up at the meeting. What you want to avoid is that discussion, right? It's that dialogue. It's the sausage making. I'm concerned a little bit about having too much content, but as long as you're bringing that up, because part of it is the public wants to know what is it that fed into the decision that was made, right? How did you get to this point? And that's the frustration that we find serving on boards, is that they want to see the iterative process, the step by step. What is it? How did you go from here to there? Because in my mind, I'm sitting here and I'm only getting halfway there, and you've got all the way here. And it's probably from this broader conversation that I was out of the loop on. Yeah. It's frustrating. Not far from here, but again, Ravalli County, they had an airport board that just went underground. They got a big grant, and 6 months, they were working on how they're going to apply that grant, and they never had an open meeting. It was all in their basements on their computers. And then they came out and announced that we're going to release our plan. And the county attorney's like, whoa, you haven't had a meeting yet about this, and now you're releasing the plan? When did that happen? And so it took a long time to convince them that no, that process has to be open and transparent. And so a lot of pushback. They finally agreed. They started having the meetings. The ironic thing is, no one showed up, right? But that wasn't the point, right? The point was that the public has a right to participate if they choose, and they never were given that choice. They probably never would have shown up. Just have the meeting, right? Have the meeting, show up at the space, do your thing. If they show up, engage them. We're making this airport for all of us. How do we want it to look? Yeah. They came around. Again, going to be assailed by Ravalli County. They're never going to invite me there. All right. Is this making sense? So just in your mind, you've got a checklist of 6 things we got to make sure that are happening, or that if these 2 things, this and this is happening, these other things have to happen as well. And the electronic part is what's going to catch you. So yeah, so email, it's efficient, but it can catch you up doing things electronically.
I have one more question
Yeah.
online. How many on your committee and can get together to work on something in person together or present to a meeting? Do we need to make a working meeting to write up documents on streaming?
Yeah, so here's another thing. So a quorum would be a majority of the group. So if you have less than majority, so here's the other thing, it's got to be an official group. It's going to be an official, this board is appointing that subcommittee to do this work. That's a subdivision of government. But if 2 of the 5 members wanted to get together and do some planning that's not created by the board, then that's just 2 citizens that are talking about a public issue. Is that making sense? That might be a way that which you can do some of that work, but just not create the trigger is the quorum or the official creation of a subdivision with a purpose. And if, yeah, I keep wanting to tell you more stories, but yeah.
But it seems like every time you subdivide, then the quorum represents the majority of that subdivision.
Correct.
If you go from 4 to 5, then the quorum.
Yeah. But if you never created a group and then 2 or 3 of them could get together over coffee and discuss stuff, and that's not legally, yeah, it's because you're not an official, because a 9, a quorum would be 5. The other part is you can have your regular meetings scheduled once a month, and you might schedule a work session. Work sessions will be far less formal, where you're coming together just to do the work of what. So in your case with the water, wastewater, you're going to say, we're just going to have a work session with Montana Rural Water, and we're going to look at water rates. And we're going to try to get our head wrapped around water rates. And it's going to be an informal meeting, which means it still meets all this criteria. But on the agenda, it is discussion with rural water about water rates and structure and process and form or whatever. And so the public has noticed what you're going to be, but you're not going to have any decisions. It's just an informational, and you may have a series of those meetings until you're ready to move something on to an official meeting that's going to take action on it. But usually work sessions, it's not uncommon for a rural community to have 1 meeting a month is going to be a business meeting. And the other meeting that month would be a work session where they have all discussion, they get their head wrapped around what the issues are. And then when they're ready to take action on that, then they move to place that on the business meeting agenda. And then, so there's a formal or informal, formal that feeds. So that's another way of trying to figure out how to do that. And the public's welcome to come, and the public will quickly realize, oh, I should go to the work sessions and participate in that, where I can engage a little less, it's less rigid, and it's more of an open discussion if you choose to run it that way. And I can have more of an influence on the policy or the outcome at the work session. Because if you show up to make public comment at the final action at that business meeting, yeah, they've already made the sausage. It's in the casing, it's in the wrapper, and it's sitting on the shelf at the grocery store. They're ready to buy it right there. I saw a hand. Yeah. Yes.
Or to then discuss it further, general.
Yeah. Yeah. So the idea of a consent agenda. So we're gonna hammer on parliamentary procedure. I think we're in a good spot to do that. Yeah, that's a good break. Parliamentary procedure, again, the one of the tenets of Robert's Rules of Order is that you only discuss one thing at a time, right? To retain or to beat off chaos. We've got 100 people. We're gonna talk about one thing at a time. A consent agenda is it's a nuanced thing, I don't know, it's where they allow you to place multiple things, multiple unique items into a single motion. And it's done by, the decision is made by consent. So if you have a consent agenda, you're going to put administrative things in there, committee reports, approval of the minutes, approval of the claims, any recommendations we came up previously, and you're going to pack it all into one motion. And when you make that motion, it's got to be unanimous when you vote on it. It's got to be consent across the board. Basically, you can't say no, because what are you saying no to if there's 15 things in that consent agenda? So typically what a board chair will say is, like, it's usually the first thing on the agenda or very top of the agenda. We'll now do the consent agenda. Is there anything a member would like to take out of the consent agenda to talk about on its own? And if no one says anything, then you go forward and vote on the consent agenda for a unanimous vote. If someone says, yeah, I'd like to take the minutes out, I've got a question on the minutes, great, we'll pull that out. Anything else? So I've got a question on the committee report from the whatever, we'll pull that out. Anything else? Good. Let's consent, by consent, we'll agree to that item, all those things in that consent agenda. And then we're gonna come back and individually hit those two other things, the minutes and the committee report, and then take action on those individually. The idea is to make things a little more efficient. So we're not making 15 motions on all these things that are just repetitive administrative things. It's housekeeping. So we're going to put all the housekeeping into one motion. Now, in a city called Great Falls, they messed up on that. They had public comment after their consent agenda. And a woman came up to the dais and she said, okay, I want to comment on that, one of the things that was in the consent agenda. And she wouldn't yield the floor. She kept talking and talking and talking. She had her thing to read on, her notes, and she wanted to read them all. The mayor, after multiple requests for her to yield the floor, asked the plainclothes police officer to remove her from the chambers. As he went up to the little, what do you call this, the lectern, he gathered up her papers and took her by the arm to escort her from the room, wherein she thought she was being attacked by someone, because he's in plain clothes and apparently, which is under dispute, didn't identify himself as a police officer. So she thought she's being under attack, and so she defended herself by punching the individual in the groin. Apparently, Great Falls police officers do not like that. So, the other thing is, the guy who's running the cameras, videotaping the meeting, he could see what was coming, and so went bzzz. So there was no video record of it, which it was claimed that it was spoliation of evidence, that they could have seen what happened, but since you chose to avert the camera eye. So as it turned out, when she retained counsel, the counsel said, tell me what happened. They said, well, they made the decision here and then they allowed me to comment on it. And they had a very astute attorney that said, whoa, 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 whoa. They made the decision first, then allowed you to comment? She said, yes. They said, all right, counter lawsuit. So they sued the city for a violation of her constitutional rights. And they prevailed. How much do you think she won in that court battle? Any guess? $500,000. And the courts don't care if you're a small rural fire district or the county of Missoula or city of Missoula. It doesn't matter what you have in the bank, because the law also allows you to raise taxes for 2 years to pay off any sort of judgment. So in your rural district, it would probably take you 10 years to get that much money. So you'd have to raise taxes and to eat that chunk up. Yeah. Or your insurance hopefully will pay for it. But sometimes insurances won't cover that type of a decision. That's a violation. So and here's the other thing is the courts found that when the city made that decision to adopt the consent agenda, everything that happened after that was the city's responsibility. So they forced the city to drop all charges against the woman, paid her $500,000, and she walked out, having no accountability on her behavior because they violated her right at the beginning. So it's important. It's important. Yeah, we can't afford not to. And just think about the public trust. Public loves nothing more than paying extra taxes for absolutely nothing in return, right? So the trust the public has in your governing body is going to go way down. You know, it's just a big debacle, right? So you've got to try to improve that. It's 10 to 5. We've got 15 minutes left. Public-private. Well, I don't know where this came from over here, right? So some of you may be serving on private boards. So that if you're in a private association like the Kiwanis or something, if they're not incorporated as a 501c3 or a nonprofit, then you make up your own rules. 501c3s or nonprofits in the state of Montana, they are under the jurisdiction of Title 35 of the Montana Code Annotated. And so there are certain laws and expectations you need to follow there. But you're a nonprofit, you're not a government entity. You're not taking tax dollars. The public doesn't have a right to expect you, so if you're in a nonprofit, you don't have to follow all these things we've been talking about here. What you need to follow is your policies. You need to create clear policies, and that's what you're governed by. Right? So that's the difference. So if you leave here and you try to go back to your nonprofit and tell them, oh, we're doing it all wrong, they might run you out. So just know that it's different. Here, as a public board, you're representing the public, you're using public funds, and you're carrying out a public purpose. You're appointed by or elected. You're either elected or appointed by someone who was elected. Does that help with the public-private difference? Roles and responsibilities. I don't remember what was that about. I probably compromised that. Yeah, and staff. Okay, the relationship, yeah. So what power do you have as an individual board member? You have the power to vote, and that's it. The power that you have comes when you're convened as a quorum and all these things are met and you have a vote. So outside of that, so as an individual board member, outside of that, you have no power. So if you're to show up as a board member, the library board member at the library and start directing staff saying, I'm a board member, the staff could basically say, go pound sand. We ain't doing whatever you're telling us because you have no power. But if you convene as a quorum of the library board and you make a decision and you direct the library director to do something, that's your power. You don't have the power to execute or carry out those policies. You create the policy, they carry out the policy, right? That's the how we've chose to operate in our country and in our state and in our local government. We have the executive branch and the legislative branch. The executive branch carries out the policies created by the legislative branch. This section right here is where we have collaboration, where we're negotiating, where we're sharing powers, certain things that the library director or the fire chief can do with the consent of the board, right? That's where the shared powers. But realize that you're legislative, you're policymaking, you're up high, not in the operations, day-to-day operations. I think of 4-H council, the legislative branch, the executive branch is going to be the 4-H or the 4-H agent. They're going to carry out the policies and enforce the policies created by the 4-H council. That's your role as the executive. You're not creating the policy. You might influence them. You might encourage them to make certain policies certain ways, but it's that policy-making body would be the 4-H council or the fire board, the hospital board, the hospital district. I don't remember all you get the idea. So understanding where that is. And then you have that employee. And then if you delegate the employee that you have to supervise all the other employees. So your evaluation is going to be of the library director. The library director then evaluates all the other employees. But to say the library chair of the board is going to evaluate the director, can they do that? Why not? Yeah, they have no power, right? So the power comes from the board. So the board collectively has to meet. Is that efficient? No. Do you have to deal with the closed executive session? Yes. Right? It's problematic, but that's how because we don't want you to be operating outside your course and scope and exercising authority that you do not have as an individual board member, because then you could be held personally liable for any actions that you take outside your course and scope. The law says that you're the county or the library or whomever, the fire district, the water sewer district will indemnify you and defend you if you're being sued for doing your job. But if you step outside that course and scope of what your legally defined job is, and you act outside that course and scope and get sued, the law says the entity cannot defend you. Even if they want to, they can't defend you. You're on your own. Lots of stories I can tell you about that too, but it doesn't happen a lot. But you don't want to be on the wrong side of that where you're operating outside your course and scope. Plus, it creates all sorts of havoc on your board. It's like, and the staff. It's like, what's going on here? Because I got 5 bosses telling me what to do. No. You have one boss, and that is 5 people, and you don't do anything unless they agree. The fire board, your board, they have to agree before I do anything. I'm just not going to take direction from one individual. You've got to come together and you've got to decide what is my marching orders, and then how am I going to be evaluated on how well I execute those marching orders. But if I've got 3 people telling me what to do, and then you're all going to sit down collectively and evaluate me, well, whose criteria are you going to use? So it sets you up in a bad spot. That's why we don't operate that way. Does that help with that? And yeah, go ahead.
Does that also apply, because I think this is, so if citizen contacts me, member, I should not try to answer questions and give them guidance, but instead direct them to for that same reason.
Yeah. Yeah, so planning boards are a whole nother beast, as are boards of adjustments. They're a lot of fun. They're advisory, your final decision maker. There's no appeal from a board of adjustments other than district court, right? If someone's going to appeal your decision, it goes right to district court. It doesn't go back to the commission or the council, it goes to district court. And both of you are quasi-judicial, which means you're operating at times. Sometimes when you're board of planning board, say you're creating subdivision regulations. That's a legislative function, right? You're hearing input from the public. You're trying to put together these regulations that are going to regulate our subdivisions. Once those are adopted, then they're sitting here, and someone that wants to propose a subdivision in your county or jurisdiction, they're going to look at those rules, those regulations, and try to create a subdivision that meets that criteria. And then they're going to bring that application to you and say, here is our attempt at meeting all the criteria that you put together in these regulations. That's when your position shifts from being legislative in nature to, what's the next one? Quasi-judicial, where now you're sitting in judgment as a judge, looking at the facts. This is what you're proposing. Here's the rules. How well do those rules match up with your proposal? And you're going to make a finding of fact, saying this and this and this do not meet that. That's when you're operating as a judge, not as a legislator. So if people are coming to you saying, hey, I don't like that proposal, and it's like, hey, speak to the hand, because I can't have this discussion with you, because like a judge, you don't want to be influenced by the prosecuting attorney or the defense attorney without the other one present. So that's when you're in that quasi-judicial role, and this ex parte communication, ex parte. You need to have that conversation in a room where I can hear from the opponents and the proponents and from the developer who's making their proposal. I can hear all of it like facts in a court case. And then you render judgment by findings. Here are the findings that we have. So it's a very much formal process, and it really frustrates the public, because it's like, hey, you're my representative. I want to talk to you about this. It's like, but in this role that I'm playing right now, I'm in this quasi-judicial role. I'm wearing a different hat, and you need to come to the meeting. You need to email me. I can't hear what you have to say because no one else, all the other judges don't have the benefit of hearing what you have to say. So you really got to encourage them to come to that space, right? The public square where we said, this is where we're having this conversation. Not on Facebook, right? Here. Does that make sense? So there's only a handful of you that may have to morph into that quasi-judicial role out of the legislative role. It's really tough for elected officials, because like you're my city council member from my district or my ward, and this is happening. Yeah, I know. but I'm not a legislator right now. I'm acting as a judge, so you need to come to the meeting. And, you know, then people don't. It's a nuancy thing that people don't always get, but it's important. So that ex parte, if they do share information with you, you've got to bring it back and say, okay, so-and-so talked to me and this is what they said. You need to share it with the rest of the judges in the room. So everybody has the same information when they deliberate on that issue, when they go through that finding of fact. Developer is going to want to call you up and say, hey, I just want to take you down to the site. I'm going to walk you through it and show you what's going on here. It's like, nope. And that's, we're going to invite all the rest of the board and the public to come down there to do a tour of the site, or have the staff organize it for you, right? So those are some of the things you just want to make be careful about when you're in and out of that quasi-judicial. When that application hits the desk in the planning department, the clock starts ticking. You've just shifted, whether you knew it or not, into quasi-judicial role. Some of them are pretty savvy. In Bozeman, they had a developer who came up and got city council, all the neighbors and neighborhood folks. They all showed up in a big barbecue in the backyard of right next to where they're going to put in the development, big multi-story apartment complex in downtown historic area of Bozeman. Mm-hmm. And we just want to hear what you have to say. Yeah, before anything became official, which I get it, because they want to shape it in a way that's going to be, you know, acceptable within the community. So I understand their heart, but as a city council member, I'd say I'd stay away from that, because you're going to have to render judgment on it, and you don't want to be part of the creation of it, right? You can't be the person that's creating it, and then I'll sit back here and say, okay, yeah, that all looks good, because it reflects all of my ideals. Yeah, not good. It's not a good look. Did we cover open meetings enough? Roles respond that we cover that sufficiently. Consent agendas, got that. Conflict of interest, we didn't get that. What's this one? Ground rules, we got that. Okay. Ooh, Party Pro, enough? Want more on Party Pro? Okay, and we have handouts in there to give you some of the structures, the specifics. Outreach, we covered that enough, or some. Minutes and records, okay, we could hit that. Ex parte, we just kind of covered that. Executive session. Let's just end. If you're willing, you can get up and leave. I don't care. I will talk as long as someone's in the room. Or we've got people online. I'll talk.
We do have one question online
Ooh,
too.
let her rip.
Would it create quorum at a holiday party or public event? All the members are attending and talking to each other.
As long as they're not talking about something within their jurisdiction. Once you do, it triggers the meeting criteria. So just, and it's not uncommon. I was the mayor of a small town in Montana. We used to have a holiday party for the council and the department heads, like 3 of them, 2 of them. And we invited the newspaper editor to come. Oh, she was a hoot. So we'd have a Christmas party, or I'm sorry, a holiday party, and then we'd go and have our city council meeting. Oh my goodness, the wine was flowing. That was the most entertaining city council meeting when half the council's, we'll say tipsy. That's very generous to say very tipsy. But at the holiday party, we just say, hey, look, we noticed it. We noticed that we were having this party, but no action would be taken, no discussion of public matters. So if you can be disciplined enough not to talk about anything within your jurisdiction, just here to enjoy each other's company off topic, there's nothing wrong with that. That's the concern on the other side is how is it going to look? Right. So how is it going to look? And are you building trust, or is this going to take trust away? So some boards may have a high level of trust, and people say, yeah, we get it. We trust that they're not going to be conducting business at this holiday party, and we're okay with that. Others might be no. We have some counties in this state that when a county commissioner walks in the room and there's another county commissioner there, the other one gets up and walks out. They won't. 2 of them won't. Gosh, I've used up all my words. 2 of them won't be in the room at the same time without this being done, for fear of being sued, because there is such a low level of trust with the citizens that they're constantly being hammered and pecked by the public around meeting issues. So that got to that point. Efficiency, oh my, way inefficient by doing it that way. But that was because they eroded time and time again that trust within the public. And it takes a long time to rebuild that trust to where we say, we get it. that you have our best interest in mind, that you're going to conduct yourself openly and fairly. Yeah. So is that good for, all right. Executive session really quickly, that middle of page R or L3, all meetings, so it's 23203 is where we're looking at. All meetings of governmental bodies must be open to the public. There's other stuff in between there that's important, but we're not going to touch it right now. Number 3 is the important part. The presiding officer of any meeting may close the meeting during the time the discussion, underline that, the discussion relates to a matter of individual privacy. And then if and only if the presiding officer determines that the demand of individual privacy clearly exceeds the merits of public disclosure. The right of individual privacy may be waived by the individual about whom the discussion pertains, and in that event, the meeting must be open. So a couple of things to think about here is that there's a balancing act. The board chair is the one that's going to make the decision whether the meeting's opened or closed. If they make the determination to close the meeting, and the individual about whom the meeting is pertaining, their privacy issue is at stake, they choose to exercise their right of privacy by waiving it, the meeting must be open. It's no longer at the discretion of the board chair, because it is that individual's privacy right. If they want to waive that privacy right, it's up to them. And you can't overrule someone else's or exercise someone else's right on their behalf. So the chair has to make that balancing act. What I recommend is that as the board chair, you approach the individual about whom you're going to be discussing and you say, okay, assuming you're on a board and you're going to be doing the evaluation of the fire chief, or for your case, the board chair will come to you as the staff member saying, our next meeting, we're going to conduct the evaluation of your performance, and all of our meetings are open to the public. But we recognize that this is going to be a discussion that you might find to be private. Would you like to exercise your right to privacy and request the meeting to be closed? I'm giving them that opportunity to engage. I'm letting them know that we're going to be discussing them, discussing him. And if you say, yeah, I want to exercise my right to privacy, I concur, then the meeting can be closed. If you say, no, I want to waive my right to privacy, then the meeting must be open. And then you have the meeting and it's the discussion, right? When the discussion relates to a matter of individual privacy. So you have the closed executive session, you discuss the matter of privacy, but you take action in open meeting. Because what is required prior to taking final action? Public comment, another constitutional right. So we've violated one, but we're not going to violate the other one. We're violating the public's right to observe the deliberations of the public body, but we're not going to violate the right to comment. So you can open the meeting back up and say, I move that we extend your contract for another 3 years and give you a 10% raise. You can thank me later. Right, so that takes place out in the open, but the discussion about your evaluation would be in the closed session. And minutes of that executive session must be taken that are kept from the public. They're minutes of the board. The board can have access to those meeting minutes, but the public shouldn't have access to those unless they have a court order, which it says in the bottom of page L3, it says appropriate minutes of all meetings must be open, must be open and kept available for inspection by the public. Minutes must include date, time, place of the meeting, the list of individual members of the public body, so the people on the body, the governing body, but doing things like this, having sign-in sheets, that's a tradition. You can keep that, but it's not a requirement of the meeting minutes. So the individual members of the public body who are in attendance, the substance of all matters proposed, discussed, or decided. So it's a reflection of what is contained. So what is it we discussed? What went into the decision that was made? And you flip the page over. Anytime the presiding officer closes a public meeting, the presiding officer shall ensure that minutes taken in compliance with subsection 2 are kept for the closed portion of the meeting. Minutes of the closed portion of the meeting may not be made available for made available for inspection except pursuant of a court order. So you want to keep those because that contains individual privacy issues. You don't want to email that out. You want to be very careful about, I'd print out a hard copy, bring it to the meeting, have them approve those meeting minutes, put it in an envelope, seal it up, and keep that separate so that the public doesn't have access to that. If you email it out, it's easy for it to get inadvertently emailed again, and yeah. So we got close. Conflict of interest. That was for the person online. Hopefully they're still there. That's where there's a conflict between your public duty and your private interests are at odds. And there's a whole code of ethics in your packet that deals with that very issue of managing your private interests and your public duty. We recognize that you're going to have an interest in the things that you're serving, on issues that your public duty is going to be in conflict with it. So I've got certain interests, and so whenever there is a conflict between my interests and my public duty, I can recuse myself or pull myself away, or at the very least declare that I have a conflict. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to not participate. At times, it may be sufficient just to say I have a conflict of interest here. I could talk more about that. Another story if you want. You willing to sit for another 2-minute story? You want to go home? Okay, really quickly. County Commissioner, Yellowstone County, was in ownership of an airplane with 2 other people. The 3 of them owned an airplane. Those 2 individuals that the county commissioner was connected with by this business relationship around the ownership of the plane bought some land outside of or and adjacent to the airport district boundaries. And they wanted to turn that into a fixed-based operation for helicopters. And so they were going to ask for an annexation into the airport district area and for land changes and things like that for land use stuff. So that was the scenario. As soon as this came to light, that this transaction was happening and the intent that was going to go on here, the county commissioner realized, oh my, there may be a conflict of interest. I have a business relationship with them and there might be, if nothing else, an appearance of impropriety here. So he immediately went to the county attorney and said, hey, here's my situation. Is there a conflict? They evaluated the entire circumstance, situation, their business relationship and all that. And it was determined legally that the commissioner did not have a conflict of interest, that there was no, and mostly it's tied around money. What's your financial relationship, right? So it was determined that he did not have a financial relationship. There was no business dealings with what was being proposed, and that did not have any bearing on his relationship that he had with them in this ownership of a plane. So he had a letter from the county attorneys declaring that there was not a conflict of interest. And then every time that issue came before the commission, multiple times it came before them for them to either hear or discuss on or take action on different iterations of it. He would always say, he would disclose the public, I have a financial relationship with these applicants in this context that has nothing to do with what's being proposed here, and that I can evaluate what's going on here objectively and without conflict. There's another fancy word I can't think of now. And so every time he would make that declaration, and then he would grill him like he would anybody else. And so the Billings Gazette, which is usually a hawk on these things, from the very beginning, they were assuaded. They were okay. They understood the system, and had he not declared that, had he not gotten that legal opinion, and that was revealed later on, halfway through the process, oh my goodness, think of the controversy that would have created. As it was reported once in the paper, and after that, it was a non-issue. So there is a conflict per se. There are conflicts that happen that are per se, but I don't read the law for you, but it's all depends on the facts of the case. So it might look kind of like a hinky deal from the outside, but there's the facts of the case that determine whether it's a legal conflict or not. So that's what I call like a big E ethics and little e ethics. The big E is the legal determination. Little e is the political side, or what does it look like? Both of them are important. You got to manage both. But oftentimes you may be the big E, I'm okay. I just need to manage the politics of it on the little e stuff, particularly around hiring. I got to hire that person. Well, another story. Public Works Director. Say a Public Works Director wants to hire we'll say it's his live-in girlfriend. They're not married and they're not related. We'll say. The nepotism law is based on marriage and blood. If there's a blood relationship or a relationship by marriage, that creates a conflict for hiring someone. Well, it doesn't meet the legal standard of a nepotism violation for the public works director to hire their live-in girlfriend, particularly if they're the most qualified for the job. So it looks bad politically. But if they don't hire the person, they have a claim against them for discrimination, because one of the things that you can discriminate on is marital status. So they're put in an impossible situation that the community could be absolutely bonkers over the fact that they're hiring the live-in girlfriend, that's just not right. And yeah, the little e ethics, it's not right, but big E ethics says it's not wrong. And if you don't, you're going to get sued and you're going to lose. Impossible situation. And I'm not making this up. These are things that are happening across the state, right? It's like, just don't apply, do something else. Anyway, I hope this has been helpful. I hope we got through sufficiently the content here for you to understand your role and scope. And we do this every 6 months. So if you didn't get enough out of me this spring, we'll do it again in the fall. And encourage your board members to show up next time we do this so that they can participate and learn cool new things that really frustrates you. Now you're the only one that's going back and all frustrated and like, oh, you guys. Yeah, you got to go.